Namaste. Good morning. I'm Alex Campbell, a lay chaplain here at the First Unitarian Congregation of Ottawa, and I'm delighted that Reverend Eric invited me to lead this service and share a few words with you later on. Many of you have probably been watching the TV news and the coverage of the terrible war in the Ukraine this past couple of weeks, in which thousands of women and children have been killed and millions have joined the ranks of the world's refugees. We seem to be so impotent in dealing with this. Putin seems to be having his way. How do we bring this to an end? It's also very worrisome. This morning, I'm inviting you to try to put all this stuff out of your minds for a few moments and to focus on ourselves as Unitarian Universalists and how we live our faith 24/7, all day, every day, day by day. And with this in mind, I light our chalice to the words of Unitarians William F. Schultz and Christine Robinson. Come into this place of peace and let its silence heal your spirit. Come into this place of memory and let its history warm your soul. Come into this place of prophecy and power and let its vision change your heart. We gather this hour as a people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, a sign of our quest for truth and meaning in celebration of the life that we share together. See how it looks. Our chalice is lit. And now our opening hymn, Just as Long as I Have Breath. It's number 6 in our grey hymnal, Singing the Living Tradition. And the Fusion Choir will come up front and help me sing this morning.
was great. That was so awesome. Unitarian minister Scott Alexander says that the history, spirit, and principles of our Unitarian Universalist faith clearly call upon us to grow bigger, more inclusive hearts. Being a UU means daily lending yourself and your soul to the building of a gentler, more humane world, most often not in grand and glorious heroic feats like those accomplished by great human saints, but in little everyday ways that have the power to transform our world, one caring, responsible deed at a time. With this in mind, come, let us worship together.
I'm Reverend Ellen Bell. I'm the spiritual care visitor for this congregation. At this time in the service, we invite people to send in personal joys and sorrows, and these are indicated by dropping stones in water and allowing those stones to, sorry, I've lost my list. Allowing the stones to send ripples out into the universe, and so the joys and sorrows can be felt by everyone, and people can either commiserate or celebrate as is necessary. The first stone today is for Margie and Sam Kopke, who are the family of our former minister of 21 years, Brian Kopke. Brian is dealing with an illness, and so we are sending good messages and goodwill out to him and his family. I know Alec requested us not to talk about or not to think about Ukraine, but I feel that we need to put a stone in for the people of Ukraine and the tragedy that is going on there. I'd also like to put a stone in for all the other refugees around the world that we don't always think about at the moment. And there's still many, many people who are fleeing from violence around the world. And we have one stone for all the joys and sorrows kept in our hearts. We are a caring congregation, and we all look after each other and look out for each other. And in addition to that, the caring contacts put out cards every week. I know some of you may have forgotten that we did this, but we are now having cards put back out, and I invite everybody to go to the table at the back after the service and sign the cards that are there. There are 2 cards today. One is for Margie and Sam Kopke about Brian, and the other is for Jan A., hoping she gets well quickly from a broken arm. We will now have a moment of silence.
Today's reading is based on words by Unitarian Universalist minister Scott Anderson. Far too often we have been a low participation, low expectation, low commitment religion. But something is stirring in our movement. People are now coming to Unitarian Universalist churches, still looking for a serious, spiritual, transforming, ethical religion. There is a growing hunger in our world for Unitarian Universalism that gives and expects much. But as we try to respond to this demand for serious religion, we bump up against the casualness that has defined us in the past. Regrettably, many people used to be attracted to UU because it seemed the religious path of least resistance. I will never forget the long conversation I had with a man following his wife into a congregation I was serving. He was having trouble understanding the UU way of religion. A lapsed and angry Roman Catholic, he did grasp the freedom part about UU, refusing to impose any dogma or moral absolutes upon individuals. But having been raised in a church where beliefs were imposed from above, not nurtured from within, he just couldn't grasp how Unitarian Universalism, like any serious religion, continually challenges each person to careful, authentic, compassionate, and responsible living. With more than a little sarcasm, he said to me, "Hey, this religion is great. It's a cakewalk, a Sunday walk in the park. No dogma, no catechisms, no confession booths, no eternal damnation or sin. I like this. If I join this church where I don't have to pretend to believe all that stuff I don't believe, I just lean back and believe whatever I want to believe." No matter how I tried to explain what a demanding, disquieting, lifelong journey it can be to be seriously on the Unitarian Universalist path, this guy just couldn't get it. Like so many come-outers in our movement, he fixated on our freedom, but he missed altogether the haunting challenge and demanding tension written into the fourth UU principle. Ours is a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. To be a UU is to spend a lifetime seeking reality and truth, and to live in this world in an ethical and principled way. There is nothing casual or easy about that. Unitarian Universalism does not give you freedom from religion. It gives you freedom for religion. Here is the great paradox of our faith. Being a Unitarian Universalist does not give you freedom to believe anything you want. It gives you rather the freedom to search for and find those beliefs from which your heart and soul cannot escape.
This morning I'm basing much of what I say on a sermon that I gave at the monthly seniors service a few years ago, which in turn relied on a sermon given by Unitarian minister Scott Alexander, from whom we've already heard this morning. What we said then is still very relevant for us today. We need to get serious about our Unitarian Universalism. This was brought home to me pretty strongly recently when I heard someone imply that it is so easy to become a Unitarian. Quote, "You don't have to believe anything, you don't have to come to church, all you have to do is sign up and pay a little for your membership, and then you can vote at the AGM." Unquote. While there is a small semblance of truth to this, it is certainly not the whole truth, and such a flippant view of Unitarianism does a great disservice to our movement. At least in my mind, it does. It reminds me of jokes about Unitarian Universalism. I have told some of them over the years, and even began my last talk from this pulpit with such a joke. Some jokes are really good and can help us laugh at ourselves. Here are a few quickies. Question: what do you get when you cross a Unitarian with a Jehovah's Witness? Answer: someone who knocks at your door to offer you coffee. Question: what do you get when you put two Unitarian Universalists together? Answer: 3 or 4 opinions. Each religion has its own book. Judaism has the Torah, Islam the Quran, Christianity has the Bible, and Unitarian Universalism has Robert's Rules of Order. Jokes such as these say something that is true about us, and we can honestly laugh at ourselves. But many jokes present a not very flattering picture of Unitarianism, or make fun of the open-mindedness which we claim to be a virtue. For example, even some of the great authors have a distorted view, such as Somerset Maugham. In his classic Of Human Bondage, he says, "A Unitarian very earnestly disbelieves in almost everything that anybody else believes, and he has a very lively sustaining faith in he doesn't know quite what." And then there's that classic scene from an episode of The Simpsons, set in the church's ice cream social. Lisa: "What flavors do you have?" Reverend Lovejoy: "Well, chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, and our new Unitarian flavor ice cream." Lisa: "Oh, I'll have that." Reverend Lovejoy hands her an empty bowl. Lisa: "But there's nothing in here." Reverend Lovejoy: "Exactly." And then some words from Garrison Keillor, who a few of you this morning may remember. Quote, "There are the folks in lay woebegone who have a big satellite dish and get 500 channels on their TV, including the surgery channel, the fishing channel, and the Unitarian channel. The Unitarian channel is what the fishing channel would be like if they didn't actually put the fish hooks and lines in the water, but just sat around and discussed whether or not there really were fish." These are jokes and funny stories about how laid back and how lax we are about our religion, and we can laugh at them. But when I think of the message behind such jokes and stories, I've stopped laughing. Why? Because I realize how terribly important it is for me to take my religion seriously. As I reach old age, and I've really recently celebrated my 81st anniversary of birth, I find myself increasingly compelled by life's vast spiritual questions and pressing ethical demands. I've stopped laughing because I believe with all my heart and soul that this troubled world desperately needs the compassionate and saving vision of Unitarian Universalism. But far too often, we've been seen as a low expectation, low participation, low commitment religion. So I've stopped laughing, because we can no longer allow ourselves to be marginalized, ridiculed, or dismissed as a lightweight religion. We Unitarian Universalists are largely responsible for our reputation as the lightweight and soft religion. As the late UU minister Bill Miller bluntly put it, quote, "For too long we have not taken ourselves seriously. We have offered a haven for those on their way out of institutionalized religion. We've demanded little and received the same. Too many of us have actually espoused the notion that one can believe anything and still be a Unitarian Universalist. We've embraced the laissez-faire spirituality that has commanded the respect of nearly no one." That sounds quite harsh. But as Universalists and Unitarians, we'll never realize our great potential and mission unless we do take ourselves seriously as a serious religious people. When we take a hard and fast look at our world, at our country, and what recently happened in our city, I believe that millions of people of many different cultures and backgrounds need the transforming faith that we have to offer. Much has been said about freedom recently, especially concerning the so-called freedom convoy that invaded and occupied our city. We all know that real freedom goes hand in hand with responsibility. Unitarian Universalism does not give us freedom from religion. It gives us freedom for religion. As Scott Anderson says, being a Unitarian Universalist does not give us the freedom to believe anything we want. It includes the responsibility to search for and find those beliefs from which our hearts and souls just cannot escape. Often we miss altogether the challenge that to be a UU is to spend a lifetime seeking reality and truth, and to live in this world in an ethical and principled way. There's nothing easy about that. All the world religions have some form of the golden rule as a guiding principle: to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Over and above this, the Jews have the 10 Commandments and many rabbinical teachings to live by. Christians have the 8 Beatitudes and the commandments to love God above all else and one's neighbor as oneself. Followers of Islam have their 5 pillars or principles and their 6 articles of faith according to which they lead their lives. Buddhism has its 3 universal truths, 4 noble truths that explore human suffering, 5 precepts analogous to the second half of the Jewish 10 Commandments, and the noble 8-fold path to enlightenment. What about we Unitarians? Do we have more than, as the earlier joke suggests, Robert's Rules of Order? Scott Alexander says that actively practicing our free religion has an inescapable quality about it. The only choice involved is whether or not to take our emerging personal truths and principles seriously enough to actually live them on a daily basis. He continues by saying, for some Unitarian Universalists, this means choosing a particular demanding faith stance, living as a committed Christian, or a Buddhist, or a Jew, or a humanist, or Wiccan, or neo-pagan. For others, finding authentic religious paths is a more eclectic individual process, gradually evolving a working set of authoritative beliefs and principles. But for all of us who call ourselves Unitarian Universalists, some of the fundamental religious and spiritual sources of authority we use in this process are our 8 principles, which are now on the new green banner. Used to be 7, you remember? Now it's a smaller banner, but it's 8. And our 6 sources, especially the challenging tension written into our 4th principle. Ours is a search for a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. The traditions of scriptures and ethics of the world's many great faith traditions, especially those of the Judeo-Christian tradition from which both Unitarianism and Universalism sprang. And thirdly, the hundreds of years of our liberal faith tradition, including the writings and the deeds of our Universalist Unitarian saints. Unitarians and Universalists over the centuries have been active out of all proportion to our numbers in seeking justice, struggling against oppression, and making this a better world to live in. Being a Unitarian Universalist is much more than the opinions and the beliefs that we hold. It is about the way we live every day. We are so fond of saying that true religion is about deeds, not creeds. And don't tell me what you believe, show me how you live. One minister pointedly put it in his sermon title, if being a Unitarian Universalist were against the law, would there be enough evidence to convict you? Being a UU is not necessarily about doing great and noble things, like Unitarian Universalist Claire Barton, who founded the American Red Cross during the American Civil War, or Theodore Parker, who protected runaway slaves with his loaded pistol, or Reverend James Reeb, who was killed in the streets of Selma while marching with Martin Luther King for racial justice and equality. Being a UU is about caring. Being a caring, authentic person, living the beliefs and values that grow in your life's center. Being UU, as Scott Anderson once again says, is about rolling up your sleeves and genuinely living a theology of dirty hands. It's about standing up for your principles, living our values and serving others. To use an old cliche from the 80s, we should walk the Unitarian talk. In this, the only choice involved is whether or not to take our emerging personal truths and principles seriously enough to actually live them on a daily basis. People around us should be able to see our religion in all the big and little ways in what we say and do, in our relationships, in how we make decisions and solve problems, in how we plan for the development of this campus, in the institutions and causes to which we give our time and energy and money, in how we care for and serve other living things, most especially other people. If all Unitarian Universalists not only promoted the 8 principles with a covenantal affirmation, but actually gave witness to those principles in daily living, what an effect this would have on our neighborhoods, on our city, on our country. If all this actually happened, what a wonderful world this would be. If we are to take our Unitarian Universalism seriously, then our beliefs, principles, and values should be visibly present in the way we live our lives. And this brings me to what Reverend Eric said in his beautiful sermon on the eve of Valentine's Day a few weeks ago. He stressed the need for love in our world and mentioned that we need to discern the way of love in our daily lives. It's about this word discern and the process of discernment that I'll close this reflection. I'll do so by beginning with my own present experience of living. More and more, I feel terribly scattered, pulled in all directions, being invited daily to register my name on many online petitions, whether it be to make my voice heard against various oil pipelines, or to petition the government to do something tangible about climate change, or to demand that the government be more just and equitable in its approach to the ongoing conflict in Palestine, or to voice opposition to the provincial government's plans and desires to open up our hospitals and long-term care facilities to for-profit companies, and on and on and on, all against the terrible backdrop of the terrible, unjust, and cowardly war in the Ukraine. There is so much to do for your refugees, for social justice, for human rights in our country and around the world. So much we can do. And yet so little time and decreasing amounts of energy, especially as we get older, in which to be involved in these and an abundance of other worthy causes that demand our attention and our involvement. What to do? Where to put one's energy? No wonder I feel scattered and pulled in all directions, as I'm sure some of you do as well. Some fundamentalist Christian groups would, or religions, tritely follow the facetious question, what would Jesus do, to help them decide what to do with their lives? While such an approach can initially be pooh-poohed as being rather simplistic and ineffectual, there is an element of truth in it. Let me so explain and in so doing I'll share some of my spiritual values that I think are important in the life of anyone who wants to bring about change, as most activists and UUs want to do. When I left school and began to work in the Durban City Treasurer's Department too many years ago, before many of you here were ever born, I joined the Young Christian Workers Movement as a way of getting involved in anti-government and anti-apartheid actions in South Africa. As YCWs, we were trained in the See Judge Act method developed by a young Belgian priest, Joseph Cardine, in the early 20th century. This method is pretty basic, and I still use it in my life more than 60 years later. What does it look like? Firstly, see. Focus on the facts, the details of the real situation, and not the situation necessarily reported in the media. Gather as much information as you can about the situation. The second point is a matter of judging or assessing those facts in the light of some norms for discernment. When I was in the YCW, these norms were the words of the prophets and the Hebrew Scriptures, especially those texts extolling the importance of justice and compassion, and the teachings of Jesus in the Christian Scriptures, such as the Sermon on the Mount, or his parables like the Good Samaritan, or those texts calling his followers to feed the hungry, clothe the naked, visit the prisoner, take in refugees. And those teachings of Jesus that were manifest in his way of life of inclusiveness and compassion. And the way in which he challenged the powers that be concerning their discrimination, their hypocrisy, their lack of justice. Another norm was the Golden Rule, as espoused by all the major world religions. So after the see part of the process and the judging or assessing part of the process, finally we come to the third part of the process, which calls for action, calls for something to be done. The decision for whatever action needs to take place, the act part, is based on the discernment process whereby the facts of the situation, the see part, are assessed in light of the norms of discernment, the judge part. Now, how could we do this, you may ask? Well, with our Unitarian sources, including the teachings, the fourth source there, including the teachings of our Judeo-Christian heritage, I see no difficulty in looking at the teachings of the Hebrew prophets and the teachings of Jesus as part of our norms for discernment. This might mean, of course, that we spend a bit of time reminding ourselves of the wealth of good stuff to be found in these teachings, something which some of us may not be too inclined to do. Then, of course, we have our 8 principles as wonderful norms for discernment against which the facts of the situations in which we find ourselves could be measured so that we can come to an understanding of what might be an authentic response for me as a UU at this time, as I try to respond to the abundance of demands placed on me every day. The spiritual qualities which I think are included in such a technique or method are the need to focus with truth and honesty as we look at the facts, openness and patience as we assess those facts in the light of our norms of discernment, all in a non-prejudicial manner. And then finally, courage, compassion, and determination as we move into the act or the doing part of the process. This process obviously takes time, quiet time, in which to stop and reflect. Speaking of which, my time is nearly up. Before I conclude, though, 2 more jokes. Not side jokes that others use to belittle us, but healthy stories that we can use to laugh at ourselves. In the 1850s, Thomas Starr King, who held ties to both the Unitarians and the Universalists, distinguished between the two with the quip, Universalists believe that God is too good to send them to hell, and Unitarians believe that they are too good for God to send them to hell. We Unitarian Universalists still seem to think that we are pretty special. And finally, a real groaner. The Unitarian Universalist was out in his fishing boat on Loch Ness when suddenly the Loch Ness monster rose up out of the lake and attacked his boat. The monster grabbed the prow of the boat in its huge mouth, flipped the Unitarian Universalist way up into the air, opened its mouth wide, prepared to catch the man in its mouth. As the Unitarian Universalist fell towards that huge open mouth filled with sharp teeth, without thinking, he cried out, "Oh my God, help me!" Suddenly time froze. As the man hung there in midair, a huge voice boomed out, "I thought you didn't believe in a personal God on whom you could call in times of crisis." "Hey, give me a break," said the Unitarian Universalist. "A minute ago I didn't believe in the Loch Ness monster either." As the great Christian author G.K. Chesterton once wrote, "The test of a good religion is whether you can joke about it. And because we joke about ourselves more than any others, we might very well be a great religion. So let's take it seriously." Thank you.
Unitarian, far broader than a Catholic, a Jew or Presbyterian. I know the world's religions and can trace their roots historical, from Moses up to Channing, all in order categorical. I'm a very well acquainted too with theories theological. On existential questions I am always wholly logical. About most any problem I am teeming with a lot of views. I'm full of fine ideas that should fill our church's empty pews. From Freud and Jung and all the experts psychological. I'm anti-nuke, I don't pollute, I'm chastely ecological. In short, in matters spiritual, ethical, material, I am the very model of today's religious liberal. I use the latest language. God is never Father or the Lord, but ground of being, source of life, or almost any other word. I never pray, I meditate, I'm leery about worshiping. I serve on 10 committees, none of which accomplish anything. I give to worthy causes, and I drive a gas-conserving car. I have good UU principles, although I'm not sure what they are. I'm open to opinions of profound or broad variety, unless they're too conservative or smack of righteous piety. agendas and discuss them with the best of them, but don't ask me to implement. We leave that to the rest of them. In short, in matters spiritual, ethical, material, I am the very model of today's religious liberal. I formulate agendas and discuss them with the best of them, but don't ask me to implement, we leave that to the rest of them. In short, in matters spiritual, ethical, material, I am the very model of today's religious liberal.
I was like, is there another verse? Even faster? No. As you may know, we've not been collecting Sunday service offerings for almost 2 years, yet during the continuing pandemic, we rely on your generosity as much as ever. Wherever and whenever you are watching this, you are invited to go to our website or to contact our finance manager to find out how to make a donation or to keep up with your pledge. Our gifts are freely given and gratefully received. We dedicate these gifts to the work of our community of faith, serving human wholeness, caring for the planet, upholding religious freedom, welcoming the stranger, and loving one another. And now our closing hymn, number 324, Where My Spirit Onward Leads.
Before we begin to close this time of worship and reflection, a reminder that our hospitality hour will begin at 11:30. Between now and then, you may want to take a screen break, those of you who are watching at home, or watch the music videos that we'll host before the happy hour begins. The choice is yours.
Although a few UUs get stuck spiritually by wallowing in negative rebellion from their religious pasts, most sooner or later begin using the freedom that comes with being UU to get serious about discovering what they do believe, finding the ethical and moral principles that inform their living, and engaging in spiritual practices that feed their souls and energize them for careful, responsible living.
The late Unitarian Universalist minister Jim Brewer reminds us, quote, "Freedom demands responsibility to others and to life. It is not enough to be merely disciples of freedom. We must also be disciples of intelligence, sensitivity, understanding, and love. It is not enough to be free from intolerable constraints, but to be free for what is good and true and beautiful. May we realize that freedom is not an end of our religion, but in reality, only its beginning." This morning's chalice is extinguished, but our connections and our faith remain. With that said, we now sing Spirit of Life. Spirit of life, come unto me. In my heart, all the stirrings of compassion. Oh, in the wind, rise in the sea. Foi de justice, ternurez-moi, s'il emporte-moi, source de vie, vive-moi, vive-moi. Before we begin to close this time of worship and reflection together, I want to say a special word of thanks to Chris, to Jen, to the Fusioneers, to Carl and Avery for supplying the sound and the light, and to all of you for coming, either being here in person this morning or tuning in on your TVs. Just a reminder, too, that our hospitality hour will begin at 11:30. Between now and then, you may want to have a screen break or watch the music videos that we'll host before the happy hour begins. The choice is yours. Now, if you can extend your hands to those around you. May we all have a passionate zest for our world, much gentleness, and may we all be more human to the end. Go now in peace, go in love, and go in joy. Be free and responsible, and then it will be more likely that all shall be well. As a postlude, we're going to sing the European anthem in solidarity with our brothers and sisters in the Ukraine. Please stand. You can all leave.
They don't want to go?